You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio. Welcome to the Bitter Medicine Podcast, where it's all about Black empowerment. Our show focuses on Black news and entertainment, arts, science, economics, history, people, and strategies that uplift, empower, and motivate Africans within the diaspora. And now, your host, whose favorite color is black, Goku.
Welcome back to the Bitter Medicine Podcast. I am your host, Koku. Glad to be back doing another show. Tonight we're going to be reading about the Yoruba Trickster God. Right? And before I get into that reading, just want to remind you guys that this show is a part of a podcast network called KWAZ Radio. You guys should be tuned into the other shows on the network. For instance,
this is DAX. You tune into the Harsh Reality Podcast, providing you with social commentary on the news affecting our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the pro-Black perspective, where Black problems are addressed with Black solutions.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
also make sure to check out the Queen's Council podcast as well, also on KWAZ Radio. So let's look at this paper, kind of a lengthy paper, so let's get into it. It says, so the title is Eshu-Elegba, the Yoruba Trickster God, by John Pemberton. At the entrance of almost every compound in the Yoruba town of Orangoon, a chunk of red laterite rock, or yangi, protrudes from a hollow in the base of the wall on the right side of the passageway. The rock is usually no more than 10 to 12 inches in diameter, with 2/3 of it exposed, and it blends with the red soil of the streets and the mud walls of the compounds. Occasionally, one finds the rock moist with palm oil or topped with yam flour or a piece of kola nut. These are the entrance shrines of the Yoruba god Eshu-Elegba, and we are called Eshu-Ona, which means Eshu of the way. Their prevalence seems to confirm the Yoruba saying cited by Fadipe, that, quote, every head of a compound must have an Eshu outside its compound, and the Baal he does not will have to give account to Eshu, end of quote. Similar but larger rocks or a molded pillar of red laterite mud dedicated to Eshu are found at crossroads and in the marketplaces. In some instances, these shrines are housed by walls and roofs, yet publicly observable, while in their situations they are barely distinguishable from other chunks of rock or mud piles. In the outer courtyard of the king's palace, not far from the entrance of the reception hall, one passes a molded mound of cement about 2 feet high, painted with vertical red stripes. A chunk of laterite rock is embedded in the top. It is the palace shrine for Eshu, to which offerings are made by the senior Ifa diviner priests once a year at the New Year of Ig-Befa festival on behalf of the Oba, which is king, the Orangoon or Ila. They spend the night at the palace casting Ifa to learn what sacrifices are required by the principal deities, so that the Oba and town may prosper in the year to come. On the following morning, the day of the festival, the Babalawa makes the first sacrifice, a large black goat or black chickens, to Eshu at the palace shrine, chanting Eshu we were sent to you by Ifa with this sacrifice, which is your own. Prayers for the long life of the Oba and of the chiefs, for women in childbirth, and for the general prosperity of the town will be offered by the Ifa priests. Then portions of the sacrifice and other offerings, if Ifa has instructed it. How many of you listening live on playback, but how many of you have actually witnessed one of these ceremonies? I know that they have these Yoruba churches that carries out some form of syncretism with like Baptist churches. So like it's like a Yoruba / Baptist, or what some will call like a jumper type church. But how many of you have actually witnessed it? And if you witnessed it or were present at one of these celebrations, did it resonate with you? As an African, did it resonate with you? All right, let's continue. Then portions of the sacrifice and other offerings of Ifa has instructed it will be placed by the Oba's servants on another Eshu shrine just outside of the gate to the palace courtyard, and on shrines of Eshu at the entrance gates and crossroads of the town. Remember this that they said here: Eshu at the entrance gates and crossroads of the town. I'm gonna, hopefully, if I remember, I'm gonna point out something later. As they do so, they carry the prayer of the old Rangoon, and no evil will befall the inhabitants of the town, that their crops will prosper, that the hunters' shots will not reach them, that they will not suffer from snake bite, and that they will live so that they will live until the end of the year. Thus, although Ogun is the principal Orisha, or deity of Isla, it is to Eshu that the first sacrifice of the new year is given. You know, recently they had that whole debate, or the whole back and forth going on social media about Abrahamic religions and their imperialist role in you know, the historical subjugation of black folks, of African people. And one of the things I thought about during that discussion was like, the Abrahamic religion, the problem with the Abrahamic religion, you know, besides, you know, the problem that we know that it is for our people, but by the time you've broken the chains of that religion and started doing, you know, really following what's more spiritual, but by the time you break free from it, oftentimes you don't even have the interest to even look into anything that sounds or seems religious. That's one of the big dangers that no one thinks about or talks about either. By the time you break free from it, your interest, you're jaded towards the whole, you know, the whole concept. You know, I see we got Life with Nelly in the room saying good evening to Life with Nelly. Thanks for being here. You know, so a lot of our people, by the time we come up through the Abrahamic religions and then break free of it, which is a revolution in itself, you're just not even interested anymore to look up and to learn about a lot of other religions that that should resonate more with us, that come from our ancestors. So even me reading this here, where I say thus, although Ogun is the principal Orisha, or deity, like a lot of people will start thinking about, man, I gotta go through and learn all these different deities, who's the principal, who's the... After I just came out of that bullshit with Abraham and them, So Abraham and them. And so that's one of our problems as well. To get people back on the right track, it's going to be difficult after having gone through the trauma of the Abrahamic religions. But to continue, within the compounds of Isla, there are numerous shrines for Eshu. Some are large chambers which open upon a main corridor with raised altars that can be seen through an entrance resembling a proscenium arch. This type is often elaborately decorated with pieces of broken crockery insert in the blackened mud base of the altar, which you can see here in figure 1. Right? You can see it here. Other Eshu shrines are more modest but contain emblems appropriate to the deity, such as the Igba Eshu, which is a large closed calabash painted with 3 black calabash. All right, painted with 3 black concentric circles. All right, so let's see something here. So yeah, this is one. This is figure 1 here, showing the Eshu shrine of the Elamoso, or the Eshu-Elegba. All right, and then we have this sister here in this next figure. They don't have a description for that figure. But okay, so down here is figure 3 that we just talked about. This is the calabash. These are the 3 concentric circles that I just described. Okay. And again, if you want these papers, just hit me a DM on the Discord. The link is pinned to the top of the chat. It's also pinned in the description of this episode on YouTube. If you want this paper, hit me up. It's not a problem for you to get a copy of this paper. Sometimes it's good to have these things for your own edification, so something to reference later on. Where was I? Okay. Yeah, so the calabash so the calabash of Eshu is seated on a large open-mouthed terracotta pot, decorated with a figure strikingly like those on the laba bags of the Shango priests. Cloths of appropriate colors, dance vestments with long strands of cowrie shells, and dance wands hang on the wall behind the calabash, enhancing the importance of the central symbol, just as a docile frames the cross on a Christian altar. Eshu has its place on the shrines of other deities, especially those dedicated to Orisha Shango. Right, so you'll hear about, in the Caribbean, you'll hear about Shango Baptist and all that kind of stuff. Right, in the compound that houses principal shrine of Shango in Isla Orangun, Eshu is represented by a mound of hardened red mud inset with cowrie shells, and also by a piece of laterite rock in a shallow calabash. These are called Shango's Ilangbara and are placed at the right front corner as viewed by the worshipper of the raised dais. On another Shango shrine, Eshu is symbolized by a covered and blackened calabash, which sits upon a terracotta pot painted black and white. The emblem is placed on Shango's immediate left. It is not only at the various shrines that one finds Eshu. Its face is the one necessary iconographic detail on the trays of the diviner priests. While the Babalawo casts his palm nuts or divine chain, the face of Eshu is directed to the face of the Ifa priest. Eshu observes the whole proceedings as the pattern of the Odu of Ifa appears in the dust of the tray, revealing the divine response to the suppliant's dilemma. At times, during the divination session, Eshu's dish is placed between the tray and the suppliant. When the divining session is over, the verses of Ifa having been sung and the sacrifice made, a portion of the sacrifice or a gift is given to Eshu, whose presence and power in the whole transaction must be acknowledged. It would appear then that in the figure of Eshu, we are confronted with an Orisha of the utmost importance for the domestic and religious life of the people of Ifa Orangun. How are we to understand these figures presented in so many diverse places, at crossroads, compound entrances, marketplaces, kings, palances, shrines within compounds, and divining sessions? So you see they mention these crossroads again. You know, the blues music was popular for these transactions that occurred at the crossroads. You go back and you listen to what they call blues in America, right? It was not uncommon, and especially for a very talented blues musician, it wasn't uncommon for them to claim that they got their abilities by carrying out this, you know, certain transaction with a devil, right, at the crossroads. Now, a lot of people, because of the Abrahamic religions, will say the devil that's being referenced is the devil from the Abrahamic religions, right? But a lot of folks are now saying, from what I've been reading, that quote unquote devil at the crossroad is really a trickster, right? And that trickster is Papa Legbo, right? So the fact that they keep bringing up the crossroads really just hammers down that thought in my head that and plus the fact they talk about the transactions of it all too, just hammers down that thought in my head about, you know, that famous blues trope that you might be familiar with. The answer must be sought by first examining each of these places and situations more fully in association with the Oriki, praise names, sung at the annual festival, and with the myths preserved in the verses of Ifa, and also by analyzing the distinctive iconographic features of the artifacts of Eshu worship. We shall then be in a position to ask whether the quote-unquote trickster designation is fitting for this deity, and if so, what it means in the Yoruba context. Perhaps the place to begin is with the Eshu shrines and the rituals that take place before them. Once a week, for example, every 5th day, the elderly senior priestess of Eshu, the Elamoso, Eshu's priestess of the first rank, right? So that's a rank. Elamoso is the first rank. Rubs the floor of Eshu's shrine with Yunyun, a grass, which has the medicinal effect of stopping bleeding. Interesting. She removes her head wrap and kneels before the shrine, singing, Eshu, I honor you because of your power. Eshu, you are the road maker. Come with kindness to me and to my family who serve you with gifts. Eshu, you are the present. Eshu, you are the present giver. Sorry. Make me rich and the mother of good children. Never allow your children misfortune. Come with your gorgeous appearance. You son of cowries. All right. Again, I really want someone to let me know. And if you know someone who's a priestess, you know, a Yoruba like high priestess type stuff, who might be a good guest on the show to talk about it, you know, send them my way, you know, or point me to their direction, and I will seal the deal and get them on the show. The devotee then casts Kola to discern the will and pleasure of Eshu. Right? We see Kola in figure 5. So this is her casting Kola. All right. Will he grant protection from illness, witches, robbers? Will he aid in the marketplace so that trading will be profitable? What does he wish? Some palm oil poured before the shrine, a piece of cola, a cock, chicken, people. When his will is known, the appropriate offering or sacrifice is made. On occasion, other members of the compound participate and share in the offering. Women fearing barrenness come petitioning Eshu's help in having a child. And when they give birth, they will return with the sacrifices promised and often continue to participate in the weekly rite. The shrine of the Elamoso, known as Eshu, is revealing. At center front on the first tier is a wicker basket and a mounded clay top and a hole in the center. Right, so the mounted clay top, hole in the center, I guess is over here. Mounted clay top, hole in the center, right? The priestess called it Adu Rogbona, a guardian of the gate. On either side of the shrine are calabashes, or rushe, or orisha pots, for offerings to Orisha Oya, goddess of the hunt and wife of Shango, and to Orisha Oshun, the goddess of cooling medicinal waters. The waters in these pots have the power to help a woman conceive. On the wall to the right of the shrine hang a dozen iron symbol bracelets called aro. Though these are placed on the ankles of a bhikkhu, children born to die, and on the ankles of other devotees of Orisha. Aro during the dancing at the annual festival in order to frighten away the spirits that entice such children from the land of the living. At the center rear is the place of Eshu. The pedestal is called Ijoko, or Ijoko Eshu, seat of Eshu. And the calabash is simply referred to as Igba Eshu, calabash of Eshu. The calabash are black cloths for wrapping and storing the artifacts of worship when not in use, especially those employed at the annual festival, cowries for divining at the weekly service, and packets of medicine, which is Ogun. Above and behind the calabash is a backdrop of patterned red and white cloths, in front of which hang a number of wooden carvings, painted black. All right. We'll see that figure later on. One of the carvings, about 14 inches high, is of women kneeling and holding an offering bowl. It's figure 8. It is a common subject of traditional Yoruba carving, except for the fact that the hair is stylized at the back of the head and extends down the figure's back in a clearly phallic depiction. 3 smaller carvings are of flute players, a motif commonly associated with Eshu. These are dance swans, Eshu-Elegba, used at the Eshu festival. 4 other small carvings are attached side by side with the right foot long strands of cowrie shells, with the 3 foot long strands of cowrie shells suspended from them. It is a ceremonial investment. It is a ceremonial vestment worn over the shoulder by worshippers of Eshu when dancing at the annual festival, right? So you saw that back in figure 2, right? You see the cowrie shells, the strings of cowrie shells here that they talked about. The figures are alternately male and female. Female figures grasping their breasts and the male figures holding swords and fly whisks over their shoulders. According to the priestess, the vestment is Eshu-Elegba. All else is decoration. Carvings were given to the priestess's father by his father. Her grandfather had them carved because Eshu had enabled his mother to give birth to him. They are not, however, the oldest or foremost Eshu in Isla and are not taken to the marketplace at the time of the annual Eshu festival, which is called Odun-Elegba. The honor belongs to the Eshu figure of another compound, a splendid 20-inch carving of a man on horseback, holding a spear in his hand, or, in his right hand, actually, according to its owner. This carving, the first Eshu in Isla, was brought from Open by a woman whom his grandfather had married, or Opine, I guess. It was then that the Ogun-Elegba first took place. Although the owner is now a Christian and no longer dances at the festival, he continues to support the Odun-Elegba in honor of his fathers and presents his gifts to Eshu through his wives and the 3 Eshu priestesses of his compound. This guy has wives, but gave up his African spirituality to become Christian. That sounds like Sounds like some kind of fair there. In the chat room, I see we got Dorico Cool Photography is in the room saying peace, family. And Nikki is in the room. Nikki, I haven't seen you in a minute. She says, hello, fam. It's been a while. Yes, it has. It's been quite a while. I was actually going to message you on the Discord. So, you know, to see what was up. We need more women participating, you know? We can't have the women going missing for too long. We need you guys participating. Where was I? Yeah, so that guy became a Christian. He no longer danced in the festival, but he still kept his wives, right? It's wild. The festival is held in late December or early January and lasts 17 days. On the first day, the Eshu figure, wrapped in a red cloth and clothed within a black cloth, is unwrapped and washed in cool water containing the leaves of the, can't pronounce it, leaves of different plants, basically, all known for their medicinal properties. The Eshu figure is then painted with black, quote-unquote, European paint, which is a dark indigo dye used in the past. I see. Cowries and packets of medicine are attached, and a tri-colored cap is placed on the figure's head, seated in a whitened calabash or porcelain basin. Right? Eshu is placed in a prominent spot in the Eshu shrine. On the second day, a black male goat is sacrificed in the shrine by the Alebi, the second ranking Eshu priestess. The blood is poured on a blackened mud image, which is the permanent Eshu of figure in the shrine. The skull and the lungs of the goat are left with Eshu, and the remainder is roasted in preparation for the next day's feast. Others come presenting gifts of kola nuts, pounded yam, cocks, and goats or pigs. The offerings and sacrifices depend upon the wealth of the giver and the demands of Eshu, as determined by the casting of kola, where a petition of Eshu has been made. You know, I'm just gonna say chicken. If a chicken or a goat is sacrificed, the blood of the animal is poured on the clay figure, and the head with it. If pounded yam or kola is presented, a small portion remains with the emblem. The principal portion of the offering is based on the daily feasting of celebrants and their guests. Late in the afternoon, on the sixth day of the festival, the Eshu figure is carried to the king's market on the head of a third-ranking Eshu priestess. The Arugba, which is the bowl carrier, right? She's preceded by the higher-ranking priestess, the Elamoso, and the Alebi, and followed by battle drummers and other members of the compound who sing, quote, "People of the market cleared away. We are coming through the market gate. My lord is coming to the market. My husband and I have arrived. Leroy, who's an Eshu, I have arrived. Baraye, Baraye, Baraye." Right? Naropi appears like a graceful clown. Eshu, do not deceive and harm me. Deceive another. Latopa, Eshu, bless me. Eshu bless me. Bara bless me. Eshu bless me. All reverence to you, Latopa. All reverence to you, Bara. Leroy comes, Eshu comes. All reverence to you, Lalupon. All reference to you, Bara. We are glad that Eshu's festival has come. Eshu, do not harm me. Eshu, do not harm me. Now you could tell the kind of person that wrote this paper, right? And that's why I'd like to have someone who's immersed in this way to come on. You know, that's another reason why a lot of our people don't switch to nothing, because, you know, to anything that, you know, is of us. It's because a lot of times the people who are really immersed and stuff like that just don't come through and, like, you know, and, you know, just show you, you know, the authenticity of it, right? Therefore, people could kind of like interact with that energy. And that will make them, easier to switch back to something that is originally ours. Once in the market, the Eshu image is placed on a mat. The Aruba sits next to the Eshu, Oriki are sung, and the devotees dance around Eshu and the priestess to the rhythm of the battle drums. As Joan Westcott notes in her study of Eshu ritual and iconography in oil, the dance for Eshu is much more energetic than the slow, graceful swaying and shuffling of customary Yoruba dancing. The Eshu dancer whirls like a snail shell, used as a spinning top. Westcott cites a praise name for Eshu. Quote, Eshu is a snail shell dancer. He spins rapidly. He knows dancing well. He doesn't join in singing. If there are no drums, he will dance to the pounding of the mortars. Right? In its exuberance and ecstasy, the dancing is similar to the Shango festival, and in contrast to the more generally organized movements of devotees in the festivals for Orisha, Oko, and Oshun. It is even sharper contrast to the gradually patterned steps and body movements of the dances of Ifa. Money, cola nuts, and palm wine are given to the Oba chiefs and relatives, to the priestesses and devotees, as expressions of goodwill of their social status. Throughout the 17 days, the priestesses are honored with small gifts and freed from domestic chores. They are waited upon and addressed with praise names by other members of the compound. That would be cool. Although the festival rituals of other Orisha also include a procession to the marketplace, there is a special association of Eshu within the market. Some of his Oriki refer to this association, quote, Eshu quickly makes himself master of the marketplace. He buys without paying. He causes nothing to be sold or bought at the market until nightfall. End of quote. At the Oje cloth market in Ibadan, no buying or selling can begin until palm oil has been poured over the Eshu-Oja, or the market shrine, by the priestesses and elders of the market. Among the 4 markets of Isla, only the large central daily market has an Eshu-Oja, which receives palm oil occasionally, or cola nut offerings, right? Cola nut offerings from various women sellers of the marketplace, right? So when we go through, we see a lot of the art that was described before. Again, the long tails of the cowrie shells, right? We see the porcelain pan that could be substituted. Right? More iconography, more cowrie shell as described before. Such offerings appear to be solely personal petitions for Eshu's aid and place no restrictions on the trading activities of the market generally. The cowries with which Eshu dance wands and vestments are decorated also convey Eshu's association with the market. For cowries were money in pre-colonial Yoruba land, right? So Evan Craft Ascari, wow, what a name. Evan Craft Ascari, in her study Yoruba Towns and Cities, refers to the fact that unlike other Orisha, Eshu is never referred to as the patron of a descent group. She suggests that he appears, quote, to symbolize all that is impersonal, superficial, transitory, and segmental, end of quote. And concludes that Eshu is the most recognizable urban of all Yoruba divinities. While it is true that Eshu appears where a relatively large, dense, and socially heterogeneous gathering of individuals takes place, such as the Yoruba market, I suspect that something more than this is involved in Eshu's association with the market. With the exception of the city of Ife, the principal market of a large Yoruba town is located more or less directly across from the king's palace, and is usually referred to as the king's market. On market day, if one looks at the palace and then at the market, the initial impression is of order on the one hand and turbulence on the other. But the observer must be careful. To be sure, the palace is an enclosed, relatively well-ordered space, the chief resident of which, according to Isla Palace tradition, is a descendant of an Aduduwa, the god who created and brought order to the world, and who became the first Yoruba king. The market, however, is not chaotic. Within this open space and milling throngs, there is an order, for vendors of various produce and other commodities have their assigned places. Nonetheless, it is a tumult, a place of exchange goods and change of fortunes. Its fragile order is capable of quickly dissolving into chaos, and a story told to Pierre Verger aptly conveys the attitude of uncertainty that the Yoruba associate with the world of the marketplace. A woman is at the market selling her wares. Eshu starts a fire in her house. She runs home, leaving her goods at the market. She arrives too late. The house is burned, and a thief runs off with her goods in the market. The threat of loss is not the only aspect of disorder that haunts the marketplace. It is also the place frequented by the ghosts of the deceased from other towns, especially the towns of persons who have died prematurely. Like the gates of the town, crossroads, and compound entrances, the market is a marginal world, a place where the unexpected can occur and fortunes can be reversed. Remember what I said earlier, right? Old blues music, right? Down at the crossroads, right? In the chat room, not much is being said, but Nikki says, I've been so busy. I hear you, Nikki. It happens, but I'm glad that you're here today. Hopefully you'll enjoy what it is I'm reading to you guys today. Make sure you guys click the thumbs up button if you haven't subscribed yet. I know sometimes there's people silently, in the background here taking in the show, but won't say anything. That's fine, but make sure you subscribe, click the thumbs up button, also click the bell to be notified of when I have new content on the channel. To continue. Order is fragile and appears to depend upon the presence of the palace and the Oba. In such a juxtaposition of spaces, the market is conveyed as a metaphor for the welter and diversity of forces for good and ill, of forces of change and transformation, personal and impersonal, that pervade human experience. In such a place as at that marginal point in time celebrated in Igbefa festival, the entrance upon the new year, awareness of the unexpected, of the accidental, and of fate is heightened. These are places and times where Eshu must be acknowledged. The Oriki for Eshu portray him as a figure of intense activity, of contrast and reversals and apparent contradictions. Quote, Eshu slept in the house, but the house was too small for him. Eshu slept on the veranda, but the veranda was too small for him. Eshu slept in a nut. At last, he could stretch himself. Eshu walked around through a ground nut farm. The tuft of his hair was just visible. If it had not been for his huge size, he would not have been visible at all. Having thrown a stone yesterday, he kills a bird today. Lying down, his head hits the roof. Standing up, he cannot look into the cooking pot. Eshu turns right into wrong, wrong into right. There's another quote, he turns quickly and walks quickly when he is angry. He hits a stone until it bleeds. That's a blues song right there for your eyes. Right? I hit a stone till it bleeds. Right? That's a blues song right there. Eshu is large and powerful and gentle, high and low, swift and immobile, present and absent. The iconography depicts him as a figure of sharp contrast. For example, the Alamoso shrine has pieces of white crockery embedded in the black surface. The Eshu figure on horseback, figure 10, is a painted black and wears a tricolored cap, red on one side, blue and white on the other, which is reminiscent of a well-known story about Eshu. Two farmers had long been neighbors and friends. One day, as they were talking to one another, Eshu walked quickly down the road between them. Quote, "Did you see that fellow in the red hat?" One farmer asked the other. Quote, "Indeed, there was someone, but his hat was blue and white," answered the other. Right? "Not so," cried the first. Again, Eshu passed between them, going in the opposite direction. Each farmer insisted that the other had been right the first time. Then each called the other a liar, and soon they fell to fighting. Neighbors dragged them to the king's palace where they had told their stories. According to Virgo's account, Eshu appeared at the palace as the combatants were speaking and declared that he had caused these friends to fight because they had not sacrificed to him when they made their bond of friendship. You know, I mentioned Papa Legba earlier, right? The Trickster God. You know, I heard a couple years ago that Papa Legba is the inspiration for the Batman character, the Joker. Have you guys ever heard that before? That Papa Legba is the inspiration for the Joker character, which we recently saw a version of again in the Snyder Cut of the Justice League, right? But that character is there stealing the idea of Papa Legba. The story clearly conveys Eshu as agent provocateur. It is this aspect of the Eshu mythology and iconography that Westcott chooses to emphasize. As the festival song suggests that Eshu is one who deceives and harms, so too the Orikian myths portray Eshu as the confuser of men, the troublemaker, the one who acts capriciously. So prevalent are these associations that Christian missionaries use Eshu as a translation of the New Testament term devil and Satan. Now, we go back to what I was telling you about the crossroads trope in blues music, right? Black folks who were Christians turned it into the devil at the crossroads, right? Because these folks in our motherland had also caused that change as well, right? It's the Eshu at the crossroads, right? The Eshu-Elegba at the crossroads. Because remember, Eshu is just basically a word for Orisha. So you have to clarify which Eshu are you talking about, right? This Eshu-Elegba, right? Also known like in the Caribbean as Papa Legba, right? That's what we're talking about here, right? This is who the bluesmen used to make their, make their deals with, right? Now even Eshu worshippers who speak a little English, as well as Yoruba Christians and Muslims, will refer to Eshu as the devil, right? That's where that comes from. Again, Abrahamic religion. It is an indefensible corruption of the tradition. Nevertheless, Eshu is a troublemaker. His own praise names, attest to it. Quote, "Eshu fought on Iwata Street like 100 men. My father comes with his club. Eshu is a wicked child who has inherited a sword. Eshu swings a club as an Ifa priest, a divining chain. Eshu carries clubs on his head like bales of cotton. Eshu do not deceive and harm me, deceive another. We continue. Eshu, confuser of men, the owner of 20 slaves, is sacrificing, so that Eshu may not confuse him. Eshu confused the head of the queen, and she decided to go naked. Then Eshu beat her to make her cry. And Virga records a story fraught with complexity, intrigue, misunderstandings, and disaster, and only Eshu would be capable of achieving. Eshu comes upon a queen whose husband has been unattentive. Quote, bring me several hairs from the head of the king and cut them tonight with this knife. I will make an amulet of them, which will restore his passion for you. As the queen makes ready, Eshu goes to the queen's son, heir to the throne, who lives outside the royal compound as required. The king is leaving for war, Eshu reports. He wants you to he wants you to go to the palace this evening with your soldiers. Then off to the king goes Eshu to whisper to his majesty, quote, embittered by your coldness to her, the queen wants to kill you to avenge herself. Be on guard this evening. Night comes, the king goes to bed, feigning sleep. Soon he sees his wife approaching with a knife. The king disarms her, and they argue loudly. The prince arrives with his soldiers, hears the cries from the king's chambers, and rushes in. Seeing the king with a knife in his hand and fearing an attack on his mother, he accosts the king. The king, believing his son is attempting a coup, calls the palace guard. A general massacre follows. The association of Eshu with diabolic and malicious activity is certainly widespread in popular stories and sayings. Aidu cites Yoruba sayings which attribute to Eshu the origins of misbehavior. The wicked are called Omo Eshu, meaning children of Eshu. And neighbors will say of one who does harm to himself or to others, it is Eshu who stirred it. Ain't nothing but the devil, right? It's Eshu. Ain't nothing but the Eshu. Aido also refers to a popular belief, which one also hears in Isla, that one may pour the taboo found of palm kernel oil on an Eshu emblem, saying, "Oh Eshu, this is palm kernel oil. I know that is not your food, and I dare not give it to you. But so and so has asked me to give it to you, even though he knows that it is not your food. And here, I give it to you in his name. So go now and avenge yourself." The Elamoso claims that the leader of Eshu is Shapana, and the deity of smallpox, and that Eshu has the same mother as Shapana, Ogun, and Shango, all Orisha, who are in some way associated with destructive powers and whose symbolization employs heat and redness. However, one must be cautious about the popular tradition that associates Eshu's mischievous behavior with the diabolic and describes his actions among men as capricious. What then is the nature and purpose of this trickery? In his discussion of the god Hermes, the thief and trickster of Greek mythology, Norman O. Brown makes a number of interesting comments that may be of help to our present inquiry. The trickery of Hermes is, quote, is never represented as a rational device, but as a manifestation of magical power, end of quote. And this is also true of Eshu. Although Eshu is less likely to employ the trickery of cunning in the use of oaths, or even the trickery of sexual seduction, which have gained Hermes his reputation, Eshu is a past master in the trickery of deception. In the verses of the Ifa priest, it is told how Eshu deceived the messenger of Olodumare, who had been sent to take Orun Miller back to heaven by substituting a goat's head and a sack and telling the messenger, the Oran Miller, had been killed by robbers, and all that was left was his head. If Eiffel verses collected by Bascom, Eshu tricks Earth into nakedness and into marriage. On another occasion, he blinks his eyes, making Oran Miller handsome and causing the child of the sea goddess to fall in love with him. He deceives gods, kings, and ordinary men, as well as demons, witches, and even death. You know, this reminds me of my days when I used to be big into Greek mythology at one time. I've talked about this in the show before. You know, that's a part of the brainwashing, right? They have you hella big on Hercules and them, right? When you have your own, right, your own Orishas, you should be reading about and studying. Speaking of that, any of you guys who are here with me live or in the playback, do you guys know of I'm talking about a very good book, a great book on the Orishas? I think I have a few. I think they might be on the Discord, but this, you know, I've been wanting to have a new physical book in my hand to read lately, since I've read a lot of the ones that I have. And if you guys can suggest a great book on Orishas so that we can understand Yoruba, you know, better, please post the name, pass it on to me so I could pass it on to everyone else. But trickery must not be seen simply as deceit. It is a power. Let me read that one more time. But trickery must not be seen simply as deceit. It is a power. Eshu, like Hermes, has the power to bind and release. With charms, he produces sleep, breaks locks, and becomes invisible. He's described as being able to transform himself into a bird, become like the winds, or appear as other persons. He confuses recognition by throwing dust, blinking his eyes, and clapping his hands. He causes people to lose their way in the forest by pointing his staff, or with the sacrificial items they have offered, enables them to avoid pitfalls. His is the secret action. And as Brown notes, secret action means magic. His is the secret action. Eshu, the trickster, is Eshu, the magician, the one who possesses the Ogun, which has the power to transform. In Oyo, this power is depicted in the carvings that form part of the dance vestment, with the figures suspended around the necks of the female Eshu worshippers. In a splendid example of such vestment in the Nigerian National Museum in Lagos, figure 7, the male figure holds small gods of power. In the Eiffel verses, Eshu is often portrayed as pointing the stem of a god of Ogun at the adversary and transforming the scene, usually for ill. The companion female figure in the vestment lifts up her breasts, sources of life-giving power. To follow these iconographic suggestions is to begin to see the more positive side of Eshu symbolism in Yoruba cult life. To be sure, Eshu will be experienced by many, possibly by most people, as capricious and even diabolical, and as a skilled sorcerer. As we shall see, there is no reason for all of this. Right. So there is reason for all of this. I'm sorry. I know something was wrong there for a second because we talked about Hermes doing stuff for no reason. So of course, Eshu must have reason for all of this. So that line should be, there's reason for all of this. For the moment, let me simply quote the Alamosa. Eshu has power. He deceives and is wicked. Olu Dumare, who made him, is now doubtful about his creation of Eshu. He does not deceive those who worship him. A person who is a servant and worshiper will not be deceived. Eshu will not fight them. Two further observations on the iconography of the Eshu figure are in the order as they pertain to the description of Eshu as agent provocateur. Right? First, First, there is a singular hairstyle of Eshu. Whether it is the most important symbol of Elegba scriptures, as Westcott claims, one may question, but one can have no doubt that it is manifestly phallic. Following the suggestion of, that's interesting. Following the suggestion of Edmund Leach regarding an association of long hair with libidinous energy, with power and aggression, right? With unrestrained sexuality and with uninhibited instinct. West argues that the phallic symbolism of the Eshu figure is unambiguously a symbol of instinctual energy, masculine energy, and potentially the meaning is confined to power, to mischievous and autonomous energy. Procreation is clearly not his concern. This, I believe, is a much too one-sided analysis of the phallic symbol associated with Eshu. But before I can indicate why, we must take note of another iconographic detail of the Eshu's association with Ifa. Now, I want you guys, again, I mentioned that Papa Legba is the inspiration for the Joker. Now, if you listen to what they talk about just now with Eshu-Elegba, right? If you listen to that character description, and you think about the Joker character as it pertains to, say, Harley Quinn, right? Isn't this description of the Eshu the exact same thing you see of the Joker character, be it in film or TV or, you know, or an animation? I see in the chat we got Thabo. Thabo's in the room. Good to see you, Thabo. Thabo says I've always been searching for a good book on the Orisha. Yeah, it's something that we need. Nikki says Baba Ifa Karate has good books. Nikki, I'm gonna try to look that up. I don't have any mods here tonight, but if any mods are here listening or here in the playback, look up the link for the Baba and please post it, because we definitely need to get some of that, you know, from a good source too. You don't want to sit down and start reading about something so important and the source is shitty. You know, like as I was reading this paper and reading the lyrics to some of the songs they sing during these festivals, I couldn't help but ask myself, like, are these stanzas exactly what the Africans with the Yorubans are singing, or is this what, you know, something a white guy distilled, right? I want something from someone, you know, I want to be able to read from someone who's fully immersed, right? And really putting out the solid information. So if you guys have that, if the Baba that Nikki is referring to, if you could look him up, go to his website, you could post his link, that would be cool. You know, let's see if he's bringing, you know, the kind of info that, you know, a lot of us are really looking for, like Thaba. To continue, following the suggestion of Edmund Leach regarding an association of long, oh, sorry, I read this, didn't I? Before I can indicate why we take, okay, so yeah, so we're moving on to the next note, sorry. Eshu figures often portray him as blowing a flute or whistle. As Westcott suggests, the act of whistle blowing is certainly to be linked with thumb sucking, pipe smoking, and other oral activities of sexual significance, all of which appear in Eshu's iconography. But by informers, ignorant of Freudian insights, said that Eshu goes out like the king's messenger, blowing his whistle to say that a great person is coming. Again, if you go back in the history of the Joker, especially in animation. I'm almost certain you'll find him playing a flute at times. Like it'll be one of the gags he just pulls out of a pocket. Right? He clears the way. Once again, Brown's discussion of Hermes is pertinent. For like Hermes, Eshu, the magician and trickster, is also the herald of the gods, the divine messenger. We think of the herald, Brown writes, as a sort of town crier, a job requiring little skill, with nothing mysterious, magical, or tricksterish about it. There is another side to the picture. The heralds are called public workers, a term which is applied also to seers, healers, woodworkers, and bards, and which connotes a socially useful and respected craft. The special knowledge they possess is emphasized in a series of stock epithets meaning wise or knowing. It is a highly paid craft. We have a herald rich in gold and bronze. More than that, it is a sacred craft. Heralds are dear to Zeus, the messengers of Zeus and of men. Their persons are sacred and inviolate. They are functionaries in sacred ceremonies such as sacrifices and the ritual of divination by lottery. The herald's badge of office is a staff, which is respected as a magically potent ... You know what that means. I heard strikingly similar depictions of Eshu from Ifa priests. Babalawo Ifa Tuogun of Ilobu said, Eshu is a messenger of Oludumare. He sets the affairs of earth in order, guards and helps the children of men, and is the messenger between the Orisha and Oludumare. Ashola, head Babalawo of Ifa priests in Ifa Orangun, said Eshu is the messenger for Ifa and some of the Orisha. He is so swift that he can be the messenger for many. When I pressed Ifa to Owagun on why, when sacrifices were made to other Orisha, a portion had to be given to Eshu. He answered, Eshu is a powerful Orisha through whom we hear the voice of Oludumare and come to know his will. He's also a powerful being who can circle the world in an instant. That is why he was put on earth and in the realms of heaven, after Oludumare had created such demons as death, disease, loss, fighting, paralysis, coughs, boils, blisters, elephantitis, rashes of every description, guinea worm, and deities of the hot temper, such as Chopana and Shango. And after he had created such good things as money, wives, children, long life, and other deities as Oshun and Obatala, then Oludumare created Eshu's power. He made Eshu's power great enough to limit the wicked practices and excesses of the demons, whose atrocities would have been limitless if unchecked. And he made Eshu's power such that Eshu could bring to men who dwell on earth the blessings of the deities of good things. According to Babalawo, then Eshu mediates between the demonic and the creative, powers of evil and the powers of good. Right? Go back to what I said about blues, right? He aids in minimizing the presence of death and in maximizing the possibilities of life. I like that, right? He has the knowledge of good and evil and the wisdom and power to cope with such forces. He is Oludumare's own messenger and shares in his power. It is in this context that we must now try to understand Eshu's relationship to the rituals of Ifa divination and sacrifice. For here the messenger, the herald, also becomes the enforcer and the infector of the action. As Babalawo Ifa Tuogun said, he sets the affairs of earth in order, guards and helps the children of men. Ifa divination is the most universal and oft-performed ritual of the Yoruba. The cults of Shango, Oku, Ogun, Oshun, and other Orisha vary in their significance from one section of Yoruba land to another. Such is not the case with Ifa divination or with the recognition of Eshu in his association with Ifa. Ifa may refer to Orunmila, the Orisha of knowledge, and the diviner priest, or to what is most often referred to as the Odu of Ifa. The 256 figures of patterns which appear in the dust of the divining tray, and which refer to a vast collection of verses. The immediate dramatic shape of the Ifa rite is relatively simple. The ritual proceeds to the occasional rhythm of gong or drum. There is the casting of palm nuts or the opeli chain to inquire of the moment, to inquire if the moment is prosperous for divination, and to discover, if necessary, what must be done to make it so. Then follows the casting to discern which Odu is to be chanted. There are 16 principal Odu, which when combined with one another form a total aggregate of 256. Each Odu refers to a collection of verses. When the pattern of the particular Odu appears, the verses are recited by the priest. At the moment, communication between Orunmila and mankind is taking place. The suppliant selects from the many verses the one that appears to him to address his question, which he may or may not have shared with the diviner priest. Further divination determines the appropriate sacrifice and how it should be made. Finally, there is the sacrifice itself, which is offered to the shrine of Eshu, unless otherwise specified in the verses. The whole proceeding is serious, sober, methodical, above all an expression of order, harmony, balance. It stands in the sharpest contrast to the troubled spirit, indecisiveness, anxieties, frustrations, the illness or ignorance of the suppliant. All right. So here we see in this figure, before I move on, the Agba Obalufon, a drum used by devotees of Obalufon, right? These drums are beautiful, man. Man. How many of you play a Congo or djembe drum? So I was hoping that this would happen, and it has happened. In the chat room, Kwado Tukumbo has corrected my pronunciation of the word IFA. Well, I'm saying IFA, and he's correctly telling me it's IFA. And I somewhere in the back of my head, I knew it was IFA, by the way. Or I had known it was IFA, but silly me pronouncing it wrong. So I appreciate this brother for returning and correcting me in my pronunciations. Rico Cooper Photography says this is very interesting. Nikki says, wow, I see it now. I think Nikki might be referring to when I likened the Eshu to the Joker story, right? If you look at those stories, I mean, they cold-blooded took that character sketch, right? They cold-blooded took that character sketch. Rico Cooper Photography says, I need to learn more about this. Absolutely. This is what we're supposed to be doing. And this is why I do this kind of show. I do it that so not only am I learning something, right, and I don't want to just learn it by myself and it sticks with me only, but you guys, if you haven't, you could learn something as well. So that's why I do, right? With these new developments, many changes have occurred within the industry, partly because of the shortage of hands in the smitheries. Women are being recruited as apprentices. Wait. This doesn't sound right. Oh, I think I was supposed to skip that a little bit there and jump over here. So this is like a real newspaper article. Okay, that threw me off. My bad. So to continue, to hear but before I continue, let me again thank you guys for joining me tonight. But let me pause for a quick station ID break. I'll be back on the other side.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
This is DAX. You tune into the Harsh Reality Podcast, providing you with social commentary on the news affecting our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the pro-black perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Make sure also check out the Queen's Council podcast as well, also on KWAZ Radio. So just before the station ID break, I got a good correction. IFA. Damn. IFA. I appreciate it. Yeah, make sure to follow KWAZ Radio on YouTube as well. KWAZ Radio is going to be doing some more stuff on our channel soon enough. All right, so you guys want to make sure you subscribe to catch it. To continue, to hear the diviner priest of Ifa recite the verses of the Odu, and to read the increasing number of transcribed texts is to be made aware of two factors about Yoruba life. By the way, to Kwadwo, are you a Yoruba practitioner? Are you a Yoruba practitioner? I think this is the brother from Obadel Cambon's site. But are you a practitioner of Yoruba? Do you know a practitioner of Yoruba that would be great to have on the show that can walk us through the whole idea of orishas, and observing these deities, right? Do you know anyone who can do that for us, right? On the one hand, one perceives in the wit, law, and wisdom of the verses of worldview and cultural values that enable the individual to see his life as one of achievement amid numerous possibilities. On the other hand, the way of life that is portrayed by Ifa is singularly the life of ritual obligation. When the verses of the Odu are recited in the divination rite, the worldview and values of Yoruba culture are presented in images and stories that provide an informative value context in terms of which the client is enabled to cope with his problem. The cosmos is likened to a closed calabash, within which is a hierarchy of beings and powers, human and spiritual, creative and malevolent, struggle with one another. It is the monistic and dynamic conception of reality. In the midst of this activity, the individual must dispose or manipulate the various powers to the best of his ability for his own well-being. Life is uncertain and, above all, a struggle. Yet for the Yoruba, it is always open to new and fortunate possibilities. I mean, just reading that uplifted my spirit just now. One's Ori, that is personal prenatal destiny, determines such general values as wealth, social status, wives, children, and health. But one may not be experiencing at the moment the fullest realization of these possibilities. Behind every particular question that is brought to the Babalawo, which is known as the father of secrets, are the larger questions, like what is possible? And what can I do to ensure an advantageous end? In the Ifa verses, a vast array of symbolic selves is pardoned before the client. Like the hero of a New Testament parable, he is constrained to see himself in terms of a gallery of roles, to ask whether any speak to him, and to make a decision about his aspirations, anxieties, relationships, and appropriate responses. You know what was killing me in reading this? Not just how it's resonating with me, but what's really killing me is like, here is a belief system of our own, you know, of our ancestors' own, that recognized, right? And if any of you have ever been in the Abrahamic religions, tell me if those religions, and to my memory, no, ever acknowledge things like your aspirations or your anxieties. Like your anxieties? Yeah, that's something I could get involved in. A belief system that recognizes that as a human being, right, I can, you know, I can lean on this belief system to kind of help me through, as a human being again, my anxieties. In the chat room, Quado says, no, I'm not. Goes on to say, I do know someone. And he recommends Person, Divinity, and Nature. Oh, I recommend Person, Divinity, and Nature by Dr. Chuck Wunier Kamalu. That name sounds familiar to me. All right, that's a book, I'm assuming, right? But I'd like to speak. Well, I guess you could speak to the author, right? So maybe that's what Quado was getting at. Draco Cool Photography says, I know a guy that's going to the continent to be initiated. I sent him the link and asked him to join the podcast. Not sure if he has left yet. Okay, I appreciate that. Right? It'll be nice to hear from folks who have actually experienced it. And it'll be really nice to hear from folks who are immersed enough to actually direct us through it, you know, or through aspects of it that then guys like myself and Thabo could then say, okay, you know, I have a direction I could go in terms of trying to learn and understand this a little bit better. By the way, Quadwo, in the chat at the top, I have the link to the Discord. I don't think you joined the Discord that we have, but by all means, you are invited. Join the Discord, and let's continue some of these conversations on the Discord. All right. Where was I? Boom, boom, boom. Okay, so yeah, in the verses, knowledge is given of the powers that are shaping his life and others that might be employed to better his fortunes. This is the importance, indeed the wisdom of Ifa. Ifa provides the knowledge of who or what is making the demand and how one should respond. Ifa therefore not only expresses in verse and right the ultimate order and dependability of the universe, but enables a man, you know, to order his life, to know security and hope in the midst of struggle. I mean, do you need more of an advertisement for something to try to get yourself into, or you know, or more aligned with, you know, versus what we're dealing with these Abrahamic religions? Beyond its importance, psychological reordering of the client's affective and cognitive situation, there is a desire to know what sacrifices will effectively achieve the desired ends. As Bascom notes, quote, the objective of Ifa divination is to determine the correct sacrifice necessary to secure a favorable resolution of the problem confronting the client, end of quote. Knowledge without ritual lacks efficacy. Knowledge without ritual lacks efficacy. It is the sacrifice that reorders, that has the power to effect the desired end. Hence, in the Yoruba scheme of things, apart from the master of possessing a bad head, there is always a determinable reason for one's experience of good fortune or of suffering, and if it has essentially to do with ritual obligations. To sacrifice is to meet one's obligations and to make one's way propitious, I guess. If the suppliant sacrifices and yet suffers, it may be that he either misunderstood the Ifa verses or failed to make proper or sufficient sacrifice. Job's dilemma of unjust or inexplicable suffering is not an issue in this religious construction of reality. Sacrifice is at the heart of Yoruba religious practice. Job's dilemma of unjust or inexplicable suffering. If you guys ever read the story of Job in the Bible, it's one of the worst stories, and it really it really, to me, is like a shameful example of the Abrahamic God, right? Making deals with the devil and playing games with this person's life. It's horrible. And yeah, at the end he comes out 7 times better. But the suffering that he went through in between, in the chat room, Quadro says, correct, I know him. But yes, it is a book. I interviewed him. Dr. Obadel Cambone is a practitioner. Okay, that's good to know. Cambone's a practitioner. That's good to know. Right? If you have an email for him, can you hit me up with an email? I'll definitely try to reach out, maybe name drop your name, and have him on the show. It's about time I start interviewing some folks again. I kind of miss it. Both Westcott and Martin Williams treat the relationship of Ifa and Eshu in terms of the polarity of order and disorder. Such a conclusion is plausible when one has understood Eshu essentially in terms of an identification of the trickster with the capricious element in human experience, or as autonomous energy, libidinal drives, as autonomous energy, libidinal drives. Could be written better, but the verses could be read better, of course, too. But the verses of Ifa will not permit such a singular and reductionistic view of Eshu. An Ifa priest will chant, quote, "The world is broken into pieces. The world is split wide open. The world is broken without anybody to mend it. The world is split open without anybody to sew it. Cast Ifa for the 6 elders who are coming down from Eli Ifa. They were asked to take care of Mole. They were told that they would do well if they made sacrifice. If the sacrifice of Eshu is not made, it will not be acceptable in heaven." The story tells of the chaos that prevailed as a result of the elders' failure to make the sacrifice to Eshu, and mocks the attempts of men to restore order by comparing their actions to one who would try to mend a torn garment with a spider's web. In other verses of the Odu of Ifa, kings lose their thrones, men are robbed on their journeys, and witches are permitted to torment the dreams of those who have failed to make their way propitious with sacrifices to the spiritual doubles, to the Orisha, to the witches, or to Eshu himself. Then it is, as Babalawo Ifa Tuogun warned that Eshu will no longer restrain the evil spirits that they may strike at the arrogant soul. Eshu, in turn, informs Oludumare, the Orisha, or the witches, when a sacrifice has been made, and may even use the sacrifice itself to enable the suppliant to prosper. Eshu then is the keeper of order. He's the one who sees the proper use of sacrifice. Quick question. How many of you have what they call an ancestor's altar? Is that it? How many of you have an ancestral altar in your homes? And how many of you don't have one and don't feel to be bothered with one just because? I'm just curious. How many of you have altars with food or water or what have you? Pictures of your ancestors. How many of you practice that? I'm just curious to know. All right. Eshu rides a great horse and examines matters like the Almighty. As messenger, as herald of the gods, Eshu is the enforcer of the ritual way of life, for without sacrifice, obligations would not be met. All would be in disorder. The world would fall apart. How does sacrifice preserve the order of life and hold the world together? In another Odu, we hear that, quote, Ifa says that this person should make sacrifice with a goat. He should put the head of a goat inside the sacrifice for Eshu. He should also make sacrifice with plenty of red oil. Ifa says that death is now ready to kill the person, but if he can make plenty of sacrifice, he will wriggle out of danger. Another quote, exchange, the Ifa priest of the household of Elepi cast Ifa for Elepi. He was told to exchange an animal for his life on account of death. Again, I really want to know if these English versions are good. Right? I see KW Dawn is here with us. KW Dawn 7 is in the room with us. KW Dawn says the Abraham sacrificial story with Isaac is a horrible story. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so many of them. Jericho Cool Photography says, I do. KW Dawn 7 says, I don't have an altar. I never really thought about having one. It's something, if we're gonna, again, it depends on what African spiritual system or spirituality you're gonna choose, right? But I can say this much. It's better for us to go that way than to go the way that we've been going, right? There is a Yoruba saying, quote, though the offering is difficult, it is not worse than death, end of quote. And as Bascom notes in the Ifa corpus, quote, the greatest number of verses are concerned with death, either directly or by implication, end of quote. Sacrifice, or Ebo, has to do with death, the avoidance of death, and with experiences associated with death, such as loss, disease, famine, sterility, isolation, and poverty. As Leinhard noted in his study of Dinka sacrificial rites, sacrifice is essentially the conversion, right? The conversion of a situation of death or potential death in any of its manifestations into a situation of life. Hence, the underlying desire in every sacrificial rite is the desire for life, whether expressed in terms of health, children, wealth, wives, or social status. Every sacrifice is an anticipation of the death to come and an affirmation of the value of life. As such, it is an expression of man's temporality, his existence amid the interrelated contraries of life and death. According to Babalawo, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, the conversion or reversal of the situation of death into life through sacrifice is Eshu's special power and is known as Ossetua. Ossetua. The term refers to the story of the Odu of Ifa, the Odu of Ifa, right? Ossetua was a child of Oshun, leader of the ancestral mothers, who possesses magical power and of the power of the 16 male Orisha who first came into the world. The birth took place at a time when the Orisha had been rendered impotent by the power of Oshun, whom the male Orisha had excluded from their assembly. The affairs of men were threatened with chaos and death by the inability of the male Orisha to do their work on earth or in heaven. Urmila, as applied to Eshu's power, is consistent with the Odu of Ifa and is a needed corrective to the analysis of Westcott, which depended too much on the Oriki and popular stories with their delightful depiction of Eshu's mischievous and autonomous energy. The sexual metaphor as expressive of Eshu's power is the sexual metaphor as expressive of Eshu's power is boldly portrayed in the carvings of a very old drum identified as Agba, Obalafon, a drum used by devotees of Orisha, Obalafon, the god who invented weaving. All right. Boom. The principal figure on each side of the drum is Eshu. On one side, he holds a snake above his head. Eshu is in complete control of the serpent's power. On the reverse side, he straddles a snail shell. Between the Eshu figures are two figures representing priests of Ifa, two couples engaged in sexual intercourse, and two women pounding a mortar. Sexual vitality, while making male and female acutely aware of their radical difference, is the mediating power that overcomes the opposition. It is a gracious power which cannot be presumed upon. Those who do not honor such a power will know it in all its mischievous libidinal energy. Desires will be frustrated and fortunes reversed. But to those who acknowledge its affecting presence, gifts will be given, such as the power of Eshu as the mediator, the guardian of the ritual process and of sacrifice, which alone brings order and fruition to the affairs of man among the myriad powers that frequent the world and threatened to undo him. My argument about the nature and significance of Eshu symbolism can be confirmed and concluded by attending for a moment to the significance of the dual symbolism of the Yoruba Ogboni society. The society of elders whose concern is with the cult of the earth. Let me highlight this. Okay. Peter Martin Williams has commented, quote, "One can see in the image of 3 set against what we know to be the significance of 4 for the Yoruba, a sign of incompleteness, and therefore concern with process and time. It accords with the Yoruba conception of the stages in the existence of man. His departure from the sky to live in the world, and eventually to become a spirit in the earth. Spirit in the earth." It's another blues song right there, guys. A Yoruba has 3 spiritual components: breath, a spirit that returns to the sky to be reborn, and the component that becomes an ancestor, right? The Ogboni express their metaphysical conceptions in the simple statement. 2 Ogboni, it becomes 3. The third element seems to be the mystery, the shared secret itself. The union of male and female in the Eden image symbolizes this putting 2 together to make a third. Interesting. Interesting. Martin Williams also calls attention to the lack of concern with Orisha worship by the senior members of the Ogboni Society and observes, quote, implicit is a denial of the ordinary man's conviction that there is an element of irresponsibility or of chance in events. Implicit also is the awareness that Eshu-Elegba, the trickster deity, cannot lead a man into misfortune unless he himself or an enemy provokes the event. Implied but not developed in Martin Williams's comments is the secret of the Ogboni Society. The union of male and female refers to the end of time. Time ends with the end of the opposition of male and female. Implied also is the idea that the beginning of time occurred at the instant when polar opposition, male and female, was created out of initial unity. And with that opposition was created sexual vitality, and that which moves between and relates as the rain that falls from sky to earth. The seeds, the seeds that fall to the ground, the semen that drops into blood of the vagina. To follow Edmund Leach's suggestion, it would appear that the sexual act itself provides the primary image of time, of man's experience of the oscillation between birth and death, death and birth. The male dies in giving semen, his life's essence. The female dies giving birth. Man, that's hella deep. You're telling me that is not, more interesting than reading a Bible or a Quran or something like that? You telling me that doesn't resonate with you differently? Dorico Cool Photography says in the chat room, when I get my dome home built, I'm going to have a whole room dedicated to my ancestors. Thabo says, I don't have one. Don't see the need for one, referring to the ancestor altar. Thabo, you mind sharing with us, if you don't mind, sharing with us, why you don't see the need? I'm just curious as to, different people's thoughts towards this stuff. This stuff that's, our ancestors did. Nikki says, me. She says, I have my ancestor altar and a prayer altar. Beautiful. Beautiful. So am I reading anything today that sounds new to you at all, besides the Joker character theft? Am I reading anything that sounds new to you? Are you immersed in Yoruba? KW7 says, I don't understand why a Christian would feel good about symbolically drinking the blood and eating the flesh of Jesus Christ. Goes on to say being a vampire and cannibal is the way of Yoruba. Yeah, they understand that fully. That's why they wrote it that way. They wrote it to be able to resonate with their people. And their people knew a little something about eating out of, drinking people's blood and eating their flesh. To continue. Let's I think we're almost done here. The secret of Ogboni society is the claim of an ultimate unity over the adversaries of man's experiences: sexual, kinship, political, and religious. The members of the Ogboni society are the elders of the community. They are beyond the time of procreative concerns. Okay, all right. Sexual differentiation is no longer as important as it was. The return to a state of infantile, undifferentiated dependence upon the mother is expressed in the salute that each member makes upon entering the Ogboni house. Prostrate upon the ground, fists clenched together, hiding the thumbs, the elder kisses the ground 3 times, and each time declares, quote, the mother's breasts are sweet, end of quote. As a secret society, membership cuts across lineage lines and thereby qualifies, in some measure, what has hitherto been the principal referent for the individual's identity. kinship distinctions are secondary to the new world of the cult house, patrilineal norms and distinctions being replaced by the unity of the Earth Mother. In their allegiance to the unity of all life on Onile, which is the Earth Mother, the Ogboni participate in the settling of conflicts that divide the body politic. The sacred emblem of the society, the Edan, Ogboni, small brass male and female figures linked by a chain, is placed on those spots where the relationships among men have been broken and human blood spilled. Expressing the unity of male and female, they possess the power of reconciliation and adjudicating differences among men and atoning for the violations of the earth. Finally, as Martin Williams noted, the senior members of the society appear to be less concerned with Orisha worship. The reason I suggest is that membership in Ogboni is only for the successful of the community. Thus, those who have prospered. Their lives are a confirmation of both their fortunate prenatal destiny and of the efficacy of the ritual way of life. They have almost completed their life's sojourn, and having lived the life of ritual obligation, they have prospered. They are the ones who have acknowledged the way and the power of Eshu. It should now be apparent why the senior members of the Ogboni society are no longer as anxious about Eshu as they once were. They have passed through the time of Eshu. Their age has moved them beyond his apparent caprice. The thumb Eshu sucks is now hidden in the clenched fist of the membership sign. Their secret transcends the alternations and reversals of Eshu's time and world. They have known Eshu in his power as a messenger. His secret is their secret. Knowing the mystery that is Eshu marks the end of time, the end of alternation, the end of discontinuities, the end of Orisha's threatening, mischievous, libidinal power. No longer do they have to make sacrifice to Eshu, but they have come to know him as the gift giver, the child of Cowries, the gift and wealth of Ase. It is in this context that we can perhaps discern the meaning of an Oriki for Eshu cited by the Dos Santos. Quote, father who gave birth to Ogboni is called by all Baba Ja Akila. Baba Jakila, I guess. When the Elamoso offers a piece of kola or chicken at her shrine, she touches the victim to her head and either press the offering or pours the blood of the sacrifice upon the face of the Orisha on the altar, thereby affecting a relationship between the Ori, that of the victim, and the power of the Orisha. In the death of the victim, the suppliant acknowledges her own death boundness. But if temporality is the alternation between life and death, then in the death of the victim with which the suppliant is identified, the movement to death is fulfilled and the order of things, at least for the moment, may be reversed. As the man sacrifices or dies in giving his semen, as a woman sacrifices, that is, dies, in giving birth, in the hope that life may be renewed and continued, so the sacrificial victim dies to give life to reverse the death-bound temporal process. This is Eshu's power, right? The trickster's magic medicine. As herald, messenger, conveyor of sacrifice, he possesses a means to the power of life, which, if not acknowledged and valued, can be known in its capricious or even destructive modes. But if acknowledged, his is the power that can bring blessings of birth and joys of life. Thus, each week, the Elamoso senior priestess of Eshu prays, Eshu, I honor you because of your power. Eshu, you are the road maker. Come with kindness to me and to my family who serve you with gifts. Just give me 1 second. Thus each week, the Alamoso senior priest of Eshu prays, Eshu, I honor you because of your power. Eshu, you are the road maker. Come with kindness to me and to my family who serve you with gifts. Right? And that's the end of the paper. I gotta tell you, I mean, reading that does more for me than all the years I was going to church and being an altar boy and all that type of stuff. It just resonates better. In fact, some of what I read at the end is kind of reminiscent of some of the readings I've done on Kemet, right? It's reminiscent of some of the readings I've done about Kemet. I hope you guys enjoyed the paper. I'm gonna do one last station ID break, and on the other side, if you have any comments or what have you, let's post those now. I'll read them live on air, and then we'll sign out and call this another episode of the Bitter Medicine Podcast. But hang tight.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
This is DAX. You tune into the Harsh Reality Podcast, providing you with social commentary on the news affecting our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the pro-black perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Also, make sure you check out the Queen's Council podcast, also on KWAZ Radio. In the chat room, Dorico Cooper Photography says, I'm going to have to listen to this one again. I appreciate hearing that, Dorico. He says this was awesome. Yeah, I think, again, the papers are shorter, of course. These articles, these journal articles are shorter than books. And I think they give you enough. All right, this is why I chose to do this way. They give you enough content. It's not too brief for you to forget, for you to lose interest, and it's not too long for the same reason. It's just right, and it gives you enough information that you can go now and look for this information. And of course, there's a reference at the end, so you could look up some of the works that they're referencing, or some of the authors' works that they're referencing in the papers, right? So now we have something that we can go ahead, right, with some knowledge, but a whole lot more interest now. And again, Nikki had posted the teacher. Let me see if I could go back and find the teacher that she mentioned earlier. Yeah, Baba Ifa Karade. All right, let me see if I could find anything on that brother right now. Yep, so on Amazon, and I'm sorry I mentioned Amazon because they're not paying me a dime for this, but you could go there, or you can find it on, if you know a black bookstore, especially online. Who's the best black bookstore online to your guys' estimation? Like, which black bookstore has an online presence that you can find almost anything you want to find? Let's answer that question before I leave, before I sign off. Which black bookstore that's online, in your opinion, right, is the best one out there where you could find anything you're looking for, things that are out of print, for example, or what have you? Is there a black bookstore that has an online presence that you think is just the bee's knees, right? That's something that we should all check out. But you could see the brother that Nikki mentioned, right? I'm going to post the link, and you guys can click it and check it out. Nikki says, I'm not immersed in Yoruba. I'm reading about the Kemetic, the Yoruba, and the Akan just to find what resonates with me. That sounds wonderful. That sounds wonderful. And Nikki, if you don't mind, you can post it here, or and as a matter of fact, you can post it in the Discord. Post it under book suggestions or something. What books are you reading right now? Maybe we can find the PDF versions of these books and we can post them in the Discord. As you guys know, the Discord has a library. It has also what I call the bookshelf, where you can go and find books on different topics, with more books coming down the road. But Nikki, if you can, you could go to the Discord and you can post under book suggestions the titles of books that you have, and you know, any of you who are here today who have books that you've studied, that you've read, join the Discord, go to the book suggestion under the I think it's under the library. Let me see, book suggestions. Yeah, book suggestions are on the bookshelf. So you go to the bookshelf channel, right? Under the bookshelf channels where we have the crypto library, the bitter medicine library, STEM library, military science, photography. You go to that first channel, book suggestions. You can post your book suggestions there, and that's for anyone who's listening to this episode of the podcast. Anyway, I'd like to thank you guys for tuning in. I will be back on Thursday. We're gonna have another discussion. You know, the Saturday Shoot the Breeze discussion seems to be going well, so we're gonna do that again this coming Saturday. But don't miss out on Thursday. We're gonna be discussing something fly, something I think we all could have a lot of you know, smaller discussions on going forward. All right. The Rico Cooper Photography says Dr. Obadeli Cambon is an amazing brother. I look forward to having him on the Bitter Medicine podcast. Well, funny enough, Dorico, I had Obadeli Cambon on the show already. And I do want to have him back again because the audio wasn't great the initial time he was on the show. Although you can still listen and get something from it. But I'd like to have him on again. Maybe I should talk to Quadro about that. But I'd like to have him on again soon. Thabo says, I think there are other different ways of venerating the ancestors. I'm not that proficient with African spirituality. Okay, respect to that. Respect to that. But it's something that we should really work on, man. Again, if you guys can put me in contact with someone, I know Quadro give me a name. If he can put me in contact, that'll be great. If not, I'll try to contact the brother myself. I'll look into the books to the author that Nikki suggested. But it's something that on the Discord we could also do that too. We actually could create a category on African spirituality and create some channels that discuss different African spiritual systems. And I think that'll be cool, so that folks who don't know where to begin, they can go to the Discord with information that we've, you know, curated. They can go there and they could actually start learning about, you know, learning the basics and slowly build their way up, similar to what Nikki's doing right now by reading about, you know, Yoruba, the Akan, and the Kemetic, right? I just want to thank all of you for being here tonight. I'll see you guys in another couple of days. All right, peace.
Thanks for listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast with your host, Koku. If you like what you just heard, we hope you pass along our web address, bittermedicineblogs.com, to your friends and colleagues, and share our show to all your social media. Be sure to check out our archive section on our website for previous podcasts. This has been a KWAZ radio production. Join us next time for another session of the Bitter Medicine Podcast. Follow us on Facebook at Bitter Medicine Show, Twitter, Bitter Meds, Tumblr, Bitter Meds, Instagram, Bitter Medicine.